Hello and welcome to Tales from the Gutter, a scandalous podcast. I'm your girlfriend who lives in Escandalo. I'm your girlfriend who lives in Canada, Mikki A. Lexa.
I'm your very anglophone boyfriend who speaks only one word in Spanish, Blake. Blake is not the word. The word is escandalo. But
Blake. El Blake.
that is not a very Spanish name now that I think about it.
It really isn't. Although I've done up designs for an Escandalo T-shirt.
Nice.
I just haven't found someone to carry it yet. But Escandalo merchandise available at some point. Today
no!
we're...
This is trashy,
no.
but you need a Scandalo, like those horrible juicy pants and all that shit. Like
across
the ass, like Escandalo.
Right across the ass.
Dude.
Oh.
Like a nice pair of chic briefs with Escandalo across my ass. I'd be very popular at the clubs, provided we could go there. Or that was my lifestyle. Do that.
Or that was my lifestyle. Or they weren't shut down due to public health concerns.
That's right. We're coming to you from inside the quarantine because it's everywhere.
Remain indoors.
Remain indoors.
Remain indoors.
Do not talk about the event.
However, today we are going to talk about a very different, very public event that involved many people touching each other and being in close proximity.
Excitement.
Today we're talking... Excitement, indeed. Today we are talking about Roman Holiday.
The movie?
No.
Thank God. Have you ever forced yourself to sit through Roman Holiday?
Oh, it's saccharine to the nth degree.
It's so boring. It's so boring.
Really is.
It's not Benjamin Button boring. Only one movie is that, and I think we both know what movie that is. But it's bad.
Ooh. So, to say that the Roman Republic and later empire had its fair share of world-shaking scandals over its 2,000-ish years existence in both the East and the West would be like pointing at a billionaire and suggesting that they may have some spare change. From sneaking out the back door of Troy and scampering off to hit it and quit it with Dido of Carthage while the Greeks weren't looking, setting up a later 100-years-long lovers' quarrel turned regional war and then brutal genocide, to the fratricidal founder Romulus solving the young city's sausage party problem by kidnapping the entire female population of a neighboring rival.
Oh, okay. You and I have very differing opinions on what constitutes a sausage party problem.
Oh dear. To Caligula's wild orgies and Nero's mandatory musical recitals unavoidable on pain of death. Commodus's pro wrestling career and Caracalla's invading, sacking, and murdering 20,000 Alexandrians over the performance of a play he didn't enjoy.
You realize eventually Trump is going to be so offended by an episode of Saturday Night Live that he's going to burn New York to the ground.
Just nukes the place.
Yeah.
Wake up Sunday morning and it's gone.
It was full of coronavirus. We had to destroy it from space. Space Force.
To be fair, I haven't been watching SNL in years, so whatever.
You're honestly missing a fair amount right now. Not right now. Everything's shut down. We're all diseased. But, like, recently.
I will return to it eventually. To the even more deadly Nika riots of Byzantium when the city tore itself apart over a sports rivalry presided over by the emperor. It's true. Yes, the Blues and the Greens. 35,000 people were murdered.
Quick shout out to the History of Byzantium podcast because it's fucking amazing. Damn, that town had riots every day for breakfast, lunch, and dinner.
Oh, yeah, that was a violent fucking place.
And their riots weren't like, we burned down a couple houses in a bad neighborhood. It's like, no, we killed 20,000 people over sports.
Yeah. As you do.
As you do.
As you do. Presided over, of course, by the Emperor Justinian and his low-born actress wife, Theodora.
Theodora the prostitute.
Theodora the prostitute, who a biographer later claimed to be literal demons.
Both of them?
Both of them. Literal demons.
Amazing.
Literal. Romans were, suffice to say, party people.
Mm-hmm.
And no one raged and let their hair down quite like the original Breakfast Club generation who saw the transition from the Republic to the Empire. Following nearly a century of civil war and sectarian violence, the generations that followed the regimes of the despots Marius and Sulla were, at best, post-traumatic and open to anything, politically speaking. And as ever, it seemed to revolve around one man, Gaius Julius Caesar. What most people don't know about the most famous dictator in Rome is that as a kid, he was a bit of a wild child, throwing tradition to the wind and rebelling against whatever the system had. Young Caesar would often wear his robes in a feminine manner and let his belt sag around his hips, resulting in many an older citizen telling him to more or less pull his pants up.
Never trust anyone who says that. Bill Cosby said that all the time.
Right? And he turned out to be a rapist.
Raping women is fine, but pull them up. Come on.
Yeah.
It's tempting.
By the age of 16... Excuse me. By the age of 16, he had known poverty and wealth, the privilege of a powerful family, and the prescription of a death sentence. And even had survived being kidnapped and ransomed by pirates, who he later personally had crucified for their crimes after spending months laughing at their demands and ordering them to ask for much, much more money.
Gotta give it to the guy. He's got balls.
He also read them poetry and then would tell them to their face, "You didn't get it because you're a fucking idiot."
That's amazing.
Oh, yeah. He was the coolest kid in Rome who everyone wanted to know, and his friends were the swankiest set the city had ever seen, cavorting romantically without a care and throwing lavish parties in the poorer parts of town. Like, exclusively. They'd go build a mansion in the poorest part of town, throw a party, burn the mansion to the ground.
This is disgusting. This is like, there's so much of this on modern social media, like... Young Emirates kids with their Mercedes, they just smash for fun.
There's nothing new. There's nothing new under the sun.
That's great though. That's really taking it to an 11. That's taking it to a 12.
Oh, just you wait. Eventually, though, as with any party, someone had to come along, misread the room, and take things a little too far.
Oh, good.
Yeah. Enter Publius Claudius Pulcher and the rite of the Bona Dea, a.k.a. the divine goddess. So, one evening every December, the women of the highest ranking and most austere families of Rome would gather to perform an ancient and lost ritual to bring fertility and success to the Republic and its citizens in the new year. The mystery cult, which was very common in the ancient world, everyone was part of a mystery cult. It was kind of like a club. This one was only open to women, and its secrets were so well protected that to this day we don't even know who the good goddess was. We don't even know who this religion was dedicated to.
Anne Murray.
As women, Anne Murray.
It was definitely Anne Murray.
It was
good goddess,
sure,
girl, get a grip. It's Anne Murray.
Yeah. As Roman women didn't write histories at least until the Byzantine princess Anna Komnene in the 1100s CE. And the male writers weren't even allowed in on the secret, with one glaring exception. To understand Publius Claudius Pulcher, we have to understand the Roman aristocracy. Some Roman families had gravitas and authority, but no money, like the Julii that Caesar was a part of. You know, like, they're aristocrats, but they're fucking broke. So they essentially live in other aristocrats, like, you know, back mansions or whatever.
Their Lord grant them before he married a rich American. Yeah.
Blah, 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 blah. Yeah. Some had money, but no reputation, like the filthy rich Marcus Crassus.
So
and then
crass,
there were
that
those
Marcus Crassus.
So crass.
Please tell me that's where
And
that
then there
comes
were
from.
the... I believe so, yes, because he was quite, he was very, well, Marcus Crassus was so flagrant with his money, he bought an invasion of a foreign land. Like, he purchased the armies, he purchased the maneuvers. He purchased the right to do it. He purchased partisans within the country and had himself an invasion. And those partisans led him into the desert, walked him around until his army dropped dead of exhaustion, led him personally into a camp where he was captured. They asked him what he wanted. He said he was after their riches. So they melted down a pound of silver and poured it down his throat.
Nice. Oh, that's so good. By the way,
and that was the end of Marcus Crassus.
Our next episode, I have a way grosser death than that. Way grosser.
Ooh.
Like, satisfyingly disgusting.
Oh, I can't wait.
Yeah, I know. It's real bad.
And then there were those Romans like Clodius, who were stinking rich and untouchably respected from birth, according to history. Pulcher was every bit the spoiled, ignorant, self-serving, rotten brat you'd expect.
Have you read Crazy Rich Asians?
No, I haven't, but I heard it's amazing.
This is the story of Crazy Rich Asians. This is essentially Singaporean society right there. Yeah, this is great.
Oh, just wait. Just wait. Records indicate he may have also been unfairly handsome, if not outright beautiful, since that's what his name also literally means. He was called Pretty. Pulcher means pretty.
That's hilarious. What an ugly word to mean pretty.
Right?
I know Latin's supposed to be like a historically ugly language, but like that's really funny.
Oh yeah, no, the Romance languages are actually quite horrible.
Ooh, Pulcher. You're really Pulcher in the face.
Pulcher. You've got such a paltry face.
Gross. If someone told me I had a paltry face, oh man, so sad.
So when
Excuse me, I am unfairly attractive. Thank you.
Unfairly attractive. And that's how it was kind of suggested. Is like, this guy's such a prick. Why is he so beautiful? So when Pulcher got it in his head one day in 63 BCE to visit Caesar's wife Pompeia for a bit of the old discreet in and out, he didn't much share concern with the sanctity of the ritual that happened to be going on, believing that all he had to do was appear and Mrs. Caesar would fall into his bed. Shoddily garbed in a veil and long, ill-fitting gown he likely nabbed from his first wife, whose name has been lost to history, Pulcher snuck into the Caesar estate under the cover of darkness and made his way to the inner sanctum. See, the ritual was being performed at the Caesar estate because at the time he was the Pope. Julius Caesar literally held the office that survived up to this day, known as the Pontifex Maximus.
Interesting.
And
they
part of it...
They had like a pope in pagan Rome.
Yeah, the Pontifex is a traditional Roman position. Huh. It goes back thousands upon thousands of years, and Caesar was one of the popes.
Interesting.
And as such, it was his wife's duty to do the divine goddess ritual. Mm-hmm. So Pulcher snuck in drag. It was in the hallway outside that he ran. This is great. I love that
this is the day that he's like, this is a good time to go.
This is a great day.
They're having their big obsessively women only fest today, and that seems like a great time to sneak in bad drag.
I like to think
dollar store drag.
Right, I like to think he partied too hard and thought it was like the day before or something.
I'm sure that thing's tomorrow. It's fine. Why are there so many chariots parked up front? Fuck.
It was in the hallway outside that he ran into a slave girl, and breaking the illusion of his clever disguise, Pulcher asked the slave, and history records it as being in a gruff and gravelly voice, if her domino was home. "Your missus here." Not expecting any men that night, let alone one dressed as a lady, the slave screamed, and the entire ritual party flooded into the hallway to see what was the matter.
Oh, dear.
There they found Pulcher trying to escape, restrained by house slaves, and shouting to be released lest he have all their heads. Pulcher's resulting legal trouble was the trial of the century, if not of all Roman history. Unlike our modern legal systems where the state prosecutes those who break state-based laws, Roman prosecutors were whoever wanted to take a swing and could afford to take the case forward. For the just wait. For the average citizen, this meant relying on friends, families, and local legitimate businessmen to enforce the laws and bring justice to perpetrators who wronged them.
Nothing sounds more upstanding than the term legitimate businessmen.
Right? No, these are wonderful people. Wonderful, respected people in the community.
Mm. They own a garbage disposal company in Queens. You know.
They build communities, literally. They're mostly builders. Oh my God, things just went horrible. This included investigating the crime, hunting down the guilty, imprisoning them, bringing them to trial, hiring the judge, and hiring the jury. Totally fair.
And hiring, presumably, the executioner. Or if you were just
obviously
really into it, you could just do that part yourself, I guess.
For the wealthy, it was a relatively cheap way of removing any political rivals, so long as they didn't have any equally useful case to bring against you in response, which was common. You'd get someone who thought that they had one up on someone, and the courtroom scene would descend into them shouting accusations at each other.
Mm-hmm.
Fun times.
But if one side is paid for the judge, wouldn't it be a foregone conclusion anyway? Or I suppose if you're wealthy enough, you could then bribe said judge for your side.
That's the thing. Things get complicated.
God.
This is Rome. For Pulcher, things really couldn't have seemed worse. He found himself on the pointy end of the hate and loathing of one of Rome's biggest, nastiest sharks. Licinius Lucullus, the conqueror of the East.
The Triple L.
The Triple L. Respected, connected, and powerful, Lucullus was quite possibly the last man in Rome the young Pulcher would have wanted to piss off, as their families were rivals and enemies throughout the previous decades of civil war. A civil war that Lucullus's family came out on top on. That win resulted in a key position in the Third Mithridatic War that saw Rome finally conquer the East, with Lucullus himself scoring so much booty that the Roman banks simply stopped counting it and just let inflation have its way with the economy.
Oh my God.
They're just fucking whatever.
Yeah, fine.
I don't know how much
so
a gold
rich.
boat is worth.
We're Spain. It's the new world. Just nobody cares. Just let it go.
Oh, you lost it? Wow. I don't care.
Yeah. It's only money.
That fortune and right. It's only money. We can always steal more.
Mm-hmm.
That fortune and favor saw his popularity in the Senate rise until he held a consulship, effectively giving him carte blanche power to do whatever he wanted, even after his term of office was up. And what Lucullus wanted to do, more than anything, was fuck Clodius Pulcher into the ground, and not in a loving way.
Okay, why did he hate Pulcher so much?
Because he was like, imagine you hate someone's family. You've hated someone's family your entire life. You were raised to hate someone's family. And the generation that is currently present to hate is the most arrogant, narcissistic, idiotic, fucking little shithead ever.
Yeah, you're making it real for me. I get it.
Yeah. Like,
and plus, I don't have any respect
setup.
for this knob who thinks that was a good idea. That's like, no,
Right?
no, I don't know.
Look,
he's like
it began stupid.
No, he's the original, like, stupid little rich, spoiled little rich kid. Yeah, this is great.
Yeah.
I look forward to this. What happens next?
Not satisfied with just charging Pulcher with ritual heresy, which is a state crime of Rome, and you could be
heresy.
Ritual heresy.
Yeah.
Yeah, which again, because it's in Rome,
That's a
the
great
state
band name.
religions. Oh my God, yes. But in Rome, because the state rituals are actually like the religion is the state, is the religion.
Mm-hmm.
This is a treason offense.
Mm-hmm.
So, but like not that's not enough. That's not enough. So Lucullus plumbed the depths of gossip and came up with a humdinger that, even if the prosecution of Pulcher failed, would ruin his name forever.
Oh, God.
See, as it turned out, Clodius may have had a fling with his sister, Clodia.
It's Rome. Didn't everybody do this?
Yeah.
All right, well then.
A couple of times. They did it a couple of times. And another couple of times. And a couple of times in public. And once more, possibly with a child involved.
Goodness.
Sexually liberated as the Romans may have been, screwing one own siblings and possibly having a child with them was beyond the pale even for them.
I honestly thought like half the emperors married their sisters and shit. Like I didn't think Romans gave a damn.
Oh, the
about
emperors,
that.
yes, but the Republic
Oh,
considered itself to be like very staunch and moral. The Republic thought that was not cool.
Gotcha.
Yeah, no, it's once we get into Augustus, we get to see where all of that goes wrong because he instituted very strict moral laws for relationships and then fucked everything he wanted to. And then when his daughter followed suit to fuck everything she wanted to, he exiled her. And then fucked everything he wanted to.
Some things never change, I guess.
Yeah. But we'll get to Augustus by the end of this. Oh, yeah. Anyway, the trial of this snooty aristocrat for the lesser crime of state-based heresy and the mega gross look at the freak crime of incest was the de facto focus of all Romans for half a year. Public businesses like the Senate ceased. Armies and commanders, including Pompey Magnus, returned from campaign to get a front row seat. Businesses closed.
Nothing
the markets
has changed
closed.
in the universe ever. My God.
And everyone who was anyone was called forward to testify about the hot nastiness Pulcher got up to, including Caesar's own mother, who wasn't even in the city at the time of the ritual.
Hey, she just needed to be involved, man.
Just like, hey, I bet that bitch has some nasty.
Oh, please, you know it was that bitch who was like, I got some FOMO, some fear of missing out here. Like, I need to be a witness. Was I here? I was not. Do I have things to say? Oh, yes, I do.
Oh, I have things. And who did Lucullus tap to persecute the and master this three-ring circus? Why, none other than Cicero, the greatest
Lord.
legal mind the Republic ever produced. Yeah. Oh, yeah. No, this is Cicero coming off of a consulship where he tried to overthrow the Republic, and everyone just kind of went, "Oh, you."
That's great.
Cicero, seeing the greatest stage in the land waiting just for him, made this already spectacle of a trial into an outright Kafkan farce, ranting for days on end during the trial about Pulcher's raw animal magnetism, his sexual proclivities, and his gender-bending sartorial habits.
I'd be like, enough with the compliments, Cicero. Get to the charges.
He talked for so long just about like how dangerous sexy Pulcher was and how perverse he was gender-wise that he later combined it into a book and published it, and it was a bestseller in Rome.
I love it because depending on how you look at this is either like an incredible smear campaign or Cicero was just like had the hots from so bad he just couldn't stop himself.
Oh, and I think it was a combination of both, where it's just like, God damn it, look at this.
I hate him because I want him and I want to be him. I'm so confused.
And that makes me want to hate him all the more. For his part, Pulcher testified that he wasn't even in Rome at the time of the Bona Dea, to which the entire city replied, "Oh, fuck, come on." Yeah, no, this is the time when he got tackled and was dragged out of a ritual. And he's just like, I wasn't there.
Technically, he was dragged out in the ritual and then dragged out of the ritual because he was in drag.
Oh.
It was worth it.
Curiously, this put Caesar, of all people, in a really bad bind. due to his position as a religious leader, which was a state position, which was a state position, as I mentioned. If Pulcher was found guilty, Caesar would have been removed from office, as the office itself would have been stained by Pulcher's actions and require a ritual purging. This would
because it would have fucked with the ceremony. So they would have had to like, hit the big do-over button, start everything fresh and so clean.
Exactly, yeah. This would have besmirched Caesar's honor, which would have damaged his chances of proceeding up the cursus honorum. The roadmap of Roman political office followed by all highborn citizens. So there was a literal step-by-step process to becoming consul.
First, you got to be pontifex. Then you have to date Cicero's sister for at least 6 months. Yeah.
He took what steps he could during the trial, including testifying that he knew absolutely nothing about Clodius's peculiarities.
Shockingly, he did not confide all that in me.
Julius, don't you sometimes dress like a woman? What?
You know that ritual they won't tell us anything about? Wouldn't it just be fun? Have you ever heard of this movie White Chicks? No, of course you haven't, but just stay with me
here. Caesar went as far even as to divorce his wife, saying no one in the city, despite the fact that no one in the city thought that she actually had sex with Pulcher or knew that he was coming over, with Caesar famously commenting on the breakup, Caesar's wife must be beyond suspicion.
I've heard this quote before. Okay.
Yeah, it's the greatest breakup distance ghosting bullshit ever, where it's just like,
that's great.
Bitch, you are harshing my vibe.
Yeah. What about you, Caesar? I can bang anyone I please. Thank you very much.
Well, yeah, I mean, I saw I came in her.
Poor Mrs. Caesar, though. Like, seriously, what did she do? She was home.
Yeah, she was home. She was doing her job, and she got completely she got dustbined over that. I should take a moment to note that in this of all is a very shallow examination of the farce of a trial that saw almost every Roman of importance play their own part, using the opportunity to air their own grievances with one another, including Lucullus and Pompey vying for position as military leaders in the East based on their relationships and connections to Pulcher. Like, this was the center of a web that literally everyone in Rome had a part to play and a stake in. And depending on what happened to Pulcher, their futures and fortunes would fall or rise. It's fucking ridiculous. As the trial dragged on, however, it seemed more and more likely that Pulcher would take Caesar down with him, because obviously he was guilty as all hell. So the crafty Julian took it upon himself to make his own justice. Enter the richest man in Rome, our good friend Marcus Crassus. Though long before the days of the first triumvirate, which would see Caesar, Pompey, and Crassus team up to rule the city for half a decade, Caesar and Crassus were already close friends and allies, having served during the Third Servile War against Spartacus. So Caesar brought the trial to an end the most effective way he and Marcus could think of. They bribed the jury. They bribed the judge.
I was waiting for they killed him, but okay.
They bribed the victims. They bribed the prosecution openly, and by the time the show was over, everyone was so exhausted with the whole affair that no one cared and pocketed the coin. Pulcher walked completely free. He even got paid some money for his trouble, and Caesar was finally able to return to his rise to power without any ridiculous interruptions.
Let alone from his wife, who he is now no longer intrigued by.
Not only that, he was now able to marry someone that he actually liked.
Oh, was he not into the first one?
He did not give a shit. His second wife he cared very much about.
Okay. Poor first wife.
And then she died.
Club, even in Rome.
Right. That, however, doesn't mean the drama was out of juice yet. as Poulter, now guilt-free in the eyes of the law, sought a sweet, drawn-out revenge against the man who made a mockery of him for months, Cicero. Coming from the same class, both were equal and had often opportunity to go against each other.
Wait a minute.
But were often
Why is he so mad at Cicero? Why isn't he mad at the guy that was all pissed at him anyway for being a spoiled brat and financed Cicero?
Well, that's the funny thing, is that at first he wasn't actually pissed at anyone. He was like, he loved the attention. But like, as the months passed, he grew to just hate Cicero.
I suppose Cicero was the one flinging personal insults at him, so that's what sticks with
exactly.
you late at night.
Despite the fact that it all came ultimately from Lucullus, it's in the words of Cicero that are just constantly like, look at you, weirdo freak.
Everybody, look at this guy. Yeah.
Look at this guy. Don't look too close. Oh my God, he's beautiful.
Don't smell.
Don't smell. Good. Don't sniff him. I touched him. Oh God.
I need to be alone.
Coming from the same class, both had equal and often opportunity to go against each other, but were restrained and controlled by their counterbalancing powers of office. A system made to ensure that no one could be a petty dictator, usually. There was, however, one political position that in Rome that had a frightening amount of power that could not be vetoed by any Senate official. That of the tribune of the plebs, who represented the Roman people. The
riffraff.
Plebeians.
Yeah,
the riffraff. Stating that his entire campaign, and like openly stating his entire campaign was based strictly on revenge, Poulter sought the seat. But there was a catch. To avoid the higher patrician classes from gaining total dominance in Rome, the tribunes had only ever been elected from the lower classes, namely the people they represent.
That makes sense.
Right? Poulter had a simple solution to this. He would simply stop being upper class.
Let me guess, this didn't involve giving his money away.
No. Namely by allowing himself to be adopted by a lower class family.
This is
typically
great.
This is
great.
Oh, I know.
This is like right? Paris Hilton's gonna go slumming in like fucking Gary, Indiana. And look at me, I'm a real person now.
Typically, this was only a one-way street. Nobles were allowed to adopt lower classes, but lower classes could not adopt upper classes because it would besmirch the nobility of their ancestors and could theoretically, under Roman religious law, render like every decision made by their ancestors null and void.
Oh,
and because most of these people had consular ancestors, it would mean that vast parts of the Roman system no longer counted. So the highly religious people. By this point, however, Poulter really had stopped giving a crap about all of this and about what the Roman people thought. And so he changed his name to the relatively more street-sounding Claudius and got himself adopted by a man
Claudius
who was
being a notoriously street name, of course.
Oh, yeah. From the Claudius to Claudius. And he got himself adopted by a man who was many, many years younger than him.
Hilarious.
Yeah. Thanks to another round of bribery, Claudius was then elected tribune. And without missing a beat, he reintroduced the proto-mafia collegia, those legitimate businessmen who had previously been banned for being legitimate businessmen. And he turned them into his foot soldiers, who he then used to expel Cicero from all of Italy.
Hilarious.
He then forced through a law that made it illegal on pain of death for specifically Cicero to return to Italy. And made sure that it lasted until a couple of years after he was out of office. And then for good measure, he took his rowdy mob and they went and burned down Cicero's mansion because fuck that guy.
That's great. I'm so insulted by you and you personally. This is what I'm going to do.
Just fuck your shit entirely.
Admittedly, like
Cicero,
as revenges go, that's pretty good.
Right?
He fucked his shit up pretty sufficiently.
Just you wait.
Oh, God.
we're almost done, but it
Oh no, this is so good. I'm very happy with this. This can go on for a while. I shouldn't I shouldn't encourage this kind of behavior, but I think it's well and truly past it. The whole point of this show is we can school the dead because they're past it, so it's fine.
Exactly. Cicero, however, did have the last laugh in 52 BC, when Claudius was brutally beaten to death by a gang of gladiators, employed by a minor official named Milo, who Claudius had used his position as tribute to abuse. Like, just some random guy.
Yeah.
He was just like, hey, I'm important. Fuck you. Fuck you.
This guy sounds like the original Karen who wants to speak to your manager. Like, no.
Absolutely. 100%.
I don't like your tone. I'm going to burn down your mansion and drive you out of Italy until after I'm out of office.
So, of course, Milo was then charged with murder, and Cicero decided to be his defender. And Cicero pulled out all of his old bestsellers about Pulcher's perversions and regaled the crowds once more by going over in intricate detail the sexual debauchery and intrigue of the victim of this murder.
So good.
He didn't even... Right?
I mean, he's not even alive to, like, feel it. And he's like, I would just like to shit on your corpse real hard.
I just want everyone to know.
In fairness, this guy sounds like such a twat. I don't blame Cicero at all. Plus,
oh, absolutely.
Best revenge possible. I've never heard of this beautiful idiot, and I've heard of Cicero.
Cicero didn't even seem to mind that he actually lost the case, and that Milo himself was then exiled, where he later died after someone bounced a rock off his head.
Cicero don't give no shits.
Yeah, Cicero doesn't give a shit. He got to go in front of people and be like, look at the freak! And as for the now low-class Claudians, my mistake, well, they had their moments. While his niece went on to marry Marcus Brutus, the most famous assassin of Caesar, his granddaughter, Claudia, would do one better, and marry a sickly young boy who was often more interested in books and culture than sex and violence. His name was Octavian, and by hook or by crook, through him the Claudians give the world Nero, Tiberius, and Caligula.
Oh, Lord.
Before both family lines were stamped out by a Roman ruling class who had just enough of their shit after 2 centuries of drama.
Ooh, fun fact. Our next episode also features the end of a royal house.
Ooh.
Nice. 2 in a row.
And that is the Roman holiday.
Oh, that's great. That was way better than the movie. Do you want to just roll on straight on through?
Yeah, we might as well. Why not? Let's do a double episode in one episode.
Yeah.
Double episode in one episode.
Seeing as we just forgot to sign off, we might as well do a double episode, so...
I mean, why not? I realized at the end of the script I forgot to put the sign-off on, so...
You realized what? Sorry?
Oh, I forgot to add the sign-off to the end of this script, so that's why I just like, oh, shit.
Oh, that's fine. That's fine. Although mine is phrased as a separate episode, because as we've discussed this evening, this episode is the first sponsored by Plague edition of Tales from the Gutter.
Welcome to the Sponsored by Plague segment.
Seemingly fitting for right now. Each of our 3 corpses this week, because again, I like to do it in short doses of 3s, are victims of diseases of various kinds. I was kind of reaching to unite these 3 into a theme, because I really wanted it to be various horrible diseases that met these people's ends. But we need some good scandalo, because it is Tales from the Gutter.
Oh my, yes.
It ended up working out so well. So our first was born in a scandal. Our last died terribly scandalously. And in the middle, we just have a scandalous man who begat an incredibly scandalous man who begat a completely scandalous twat who happens to be very orange. We'll get there. All right.
Oh, I can't wait.
So we have three separate plagues today. And we're going back to the oldest Goths here first, which means the old big boy plague itself, the Black Plague.
Ooh.
So our Black Plague victim today is Queen Joan II of Navarre. If you're an unlettered bumpkin like myself, Navarre was a kingdom in what's now part of northern Spain. I think it was Basque Kingdom, around that kind of place. Joan was born in 1312 and died in 1349 at the age of 37. According to the historyofroyalwomen.com, Joan's short life featured a lot of inheritance shuffle, but eventually saw her assume the Navarrese throne as co-ruler with her husband and, of course, cousin, Philip of Evreux. As co-ruler, Joan signed off on plenty of legislation, but also found time to do her main royal duty with a gusto, producing 9 children, including a son, Charles, who would succeed her in Navarre, and 2 daughters, Maria and Blanche, who would become the queens of Aragon and France, respectively. So, not in a scandal of life. Joan II actually did pretty well. She lived a fairly productive and largely blameless life, all before dying at the age of 40 of the plague. So good work for Joan, but kind of shitty for the context of this podcast. Fortunately, Joan's infancy and birth took place at the height of a scandalo during something called the Tour de Nestle affair. Have you heard of this before?
I've heard of, but I don't actually know the details.
Okay, I've never heard of the Tour de Nestle affair, and it got so fun so fast, and then just got way bigger than I expected. It's pretty fun. All right. So, Joan's mom, Joan's mom, Margaret of Burgundy, was the wife of Prince Louis, the future King Louis X of France. Are you having a moment? Oh, go ahead.
No, I just realized this story. Watch Nightfall. There's a shortly lived 2-season show on history that was trying to be like historical Game of Thrones.
This would do it.
It actually retells this story.
Oh, this would do it.
It's just like
this would do it really well. Okay, so Margaret of Burgundy, Joan II's mom. She was the wife of Prince Louis, the future King Louis X of France, and Louis I of Navarre. Joan's father, however, wasn't necessarily Louis X/1, at least not according to the 14th century French royalist rumor mill. So rumor mill, I really wanted there to be a fun French term for it. It's machine de rumeur. I'm so bored.
Although I kind of like the mechanism of it, the implication that it's like, it's bigger than just a rumor. No, it's a mechanism. It's an inescapable...
Ours is a whole mill!
Like, uncaring. No, a mill is like artisanal, happy, wooden, inoffensive. A machine. Ooh.
When was the last time you were to a mill? My God. All right.
Upper Clements Park.
Oh, it's becoming a Gordonstone, one of those creepy Scottish schools that educated Prince Charles. Upper Clements is, yeah. I know. We're getting posh around here. But we're diverging. All right. Let's see here. Yes, 14th century French royalist Goths, which accused Margaret and her 2 sisters-in-law of adultery. This was a big deal because collectively Margaret and her co-accused, Blanche and Joan, a different Joan, were all married to the sons of the King of France. So all 3 sons of the King of France, all their wives get accused of adultery all at the same time. Margaret's marriage to Prince Louis was an unhappy, argumentative one. Blanche's marriage to Prince Charles is said to have been very boring. Blanche's sister, Joan, was the only one of the 3 who apparently married for love and made it work. Her husband, Prince Philippe, we're going to say Prince Philip because they're all anglicized in all these histories, and that's the only one that snuck in, so Prince Philip, wrote her a mountain of love letters, which sounds pretty nice. Except that those that remain are described as being as formulaic as they are numerous, so not necessarily the best. Still, good for this Joan. Not so good for Margaret and Blanche, or their husbands, or their soon-to-be lovers, the Norman knights, the brothers Philip and Walter of Annay. So, the story of the Tour de Nestle begins with 6 embroidered purses and ends with some impressively gross torture, execution, and eventually 100 Years' War. Here's what happened. King Philip IV of France, in addition to his 3 sons and their allegedly slutty wives, had a daughter, Isabella. Isabella was married to Edward II, the gay King of England, and Eddie helped her pick out some really pretty embroidered purses to give as gifts to her 3 sisters-in-law and their brothers as gifts during a visit to France, because apparently brothers also love Nice little embroidered purses. I like that.
It was a particular time.
I like that this era of France was just like, no, fuck your gender roles. This is good. I'm down with this. Everything else in the story is horrible, but that's nice.
There you go.
According to HistoricUK.com, Queen Isabella ran into the Aunay brothers back in England shortly after returning from France. She ran into them at a tournament. When she met them, they were wearing King Eddie's cute embroidered purses. Either because they didn't expect to run into Isabella, or because they're both dumb as goddamn rocks. Naturally suspicious, Isabella wrote a letter to her father, telling her what she thinks is going on, and he puts the knights and all three princesses under surveillance. Very soon after, King Philip had the knights arrested along with his three daughters-in-law, presumably making that evening's family dinner somewhat awkward. The two men and three women were accused... 2 men and 3 women who... The 2 men were brothers and 2 of the 3 women were sisters, just to fully kinkify this all up for everyone. And to keep the incest theme from last episode going. They were accused of meeting at an old guardhouse on the River Seine called the Tour de Nestle, to eat, drink, and extramaritally fuck. The charges implied that these meetings had been going on for years. Joan, the youngest sister and youngest princess, was initially not implicated in the adultery, but charged just with having been present. But under torture, the Aunay brothers kissed and told and implicated her as well, before being sentenced to death. And as I mentioned, what a death! According to the delightfully named ExecutedToday.com, the Knights Aunay were skinned alive, broken on the...
Oh my god!
Hold on, skinned alive, broken on the wheel with iron bars, burned with hot lead and sulfur, castrated, they had their genitals eaten by dogs, and then they were decapitated and their bodies were displayed to the public until they rotted.
How the fuck do you get to the end of that?
I don't know! I don't know if they did. Well, I mean, you'd be pretty out of it, I would hope. Okay, broken on the wheel I'd heard of before. Didn't really understand it. Like, strapped to a wheel and literally broken down with an iron bar.
Well, there's different versions of being broken on the wheel, so it depends on, like, the era and stuff. Mm-hmm. So, the way that it sounds like they're describing it, or you're describing it, is that, yeah, you just simply tie someone to a wheel and you smash them up. Mm-hmm. Another way of doing it is to actually, like, utilize the wheel. So you roll them through town and they get smashed up by having their arms and stuff, like, attached under. So, like, when it rolls, it breaks their arms that way.
Christ.
Or there's the third way where you break them separately and then you forcibly intertwine their arms and legs into the wheel spokes and then tie them and then roll them.
Why do you know this? This is horrifying.
Because I have a history degree.
Oh, blah, blah. Back to my clearly not history degree having tiny snippets of history. Alright. Margaret and Blanche, the 2 older princesses. They did better, but not greatly so. They were found guilty of adultery. They were stripped and given the full Cersei Lannister haircut and probable shame marches. And then they were... Shame. And then they were... Sure. Right. And then... I can't, okay. And then they were imprisoned without clothes or bedding in cells exposed to the elements. Joan was found innocent, either through the intercession of her still adoring, if uncreative husband, or because she was the only princess in Paris not actually banging the Aunay brothers. We don't really know.
Yeah.
The Tour de Nestle affair would have huge repercussions for all of France and England as well. Separating two of the princes from their wives made the arrival of a male heir less likely, and the stress of the whole scandal did in the old king, King Philip, who died, I believe, within the same year after the trial. Louis, the older prince and Joan II's dad, succeeded him, but then he died only 2 years later. By the time all the squabbles over the throne were finished, the Capetian dynasty had ended without a male heir, and the court's efforts to keep an English king off the throne eventually ignited the 100 Years' War.
Huzzah!
Exactly. So, way to go for extramaritally banging and tearing down your whole society. Good times. As for Margaret, she died only a year into her imprisonment under suspicious circumstances. Her daughter, and now finally again the subject of this segment, Joan II, was repeatedly declared legitimate by her father during his short reign as King Louis of France and Navarre, but no one ever really totally bought it. Joan II was only 2 years old during the Tour de Nesle trials, meaning her conception fell during the period her mother was banging at least one of the Aunay brothers. As a result, she would be passed over for the thrones of Navarre and France repeatedly, and unfairly, and presumably suffered a lifetime of an endless barrage of really mean ta mère jokes. When Joan did finally get at least one of the thrones that she was owed, she up and died of the plague before 40. The moral of this story is that life's a bitch. You shouldn't marry princesses, or you shouldn't fuck married princesses. Pretty purses are dead giveaways, and disease doesn't care if you've been bad or good, so for heaven's sakes, remain indoors.
Well done.
Thank you. So that's our glacially cold goss for our scandalous birth segment. For our frigid goss, our medium temp, we'll be moving forward to what contemporaries would probably call the plague to end all plagues, given their overstatement at the time, the Spanish flu.
Ooh.
So, the Spanish flu isn't just a handy way to dispatch ancillary characters and drive up dramatic tension in early 20th century period pieces. It's also a real-world disease, and it killed somewhere between 17 and 100 million people. One of those people has a name that you may know, and one that you may have more recently begun to reassociate with disease and death, in addition to existing associations with disgust and depravity. That name, of course, is Trump. In this case, Friedrich Trump, grandfather to the great Orange Menace himself. Are you familiar with Friedrich at all?
I like vaguely aware that he got kicked out of the Yukon for being a smut purveyor.
You're definitely on the right track, and the similarities do not end there.
Oh my.
Friedrich Trump was born in 1869 in Karlstadt, then part of the Kingdom of Bavaria. Beginning what would become a bit of a family tradition, Friedrich Trump avoided compulsory military service in his home country, although in his case he did it by moving to America and not developing a super legitimate case of bone spurs. Technically, this makes Friedrich Trump an illegal emigrant, although not an illegal immigrant. But most importantly, he's still not a Mexican of any kind, so it's fine, nobody cares. Young Friedrich settled in New York with his sister, working as a barber, before eventually making his way west, young man, to the brand new state of Washington, where he settled in Seattle. There, young Friedrich displayed the customary Trump respect for women by opening a restaurant in Seattle's red light district that Trump family biographer Gwenda Blair notes advertised rooms for ladies, which was polite speak for "this restaurant has whores, boys." During his time in Washington State, Friedrich allegedly became involved in some shady land deals, if one can believe such a thing. According to Trump biographer Blair, young Friedrich placed a claim on land in Monte Cristo, Washington, that would allow him to mine gold despite not actually owning the land. This was unfortunate for the local resident who did own the land, but the U.S. Land Office at the time apparently did a brisk business in bribes, approving competing land claims. Trump's claims allowed him to mine the land he did not own, but they did not allow him to construct any businesses. So, of course, he did no mining and built and opened a hotel. Trump arrived in town at the start of a mining boom, and he left just as it ended, having made more money off feeding, boarding, and lady entertaining the miners than any of the miners had actually made off mining. Young Friedrich also managed to leave. This is great. This is the Trump luck. This actually terrifies me that the Trump luck has stuck this true this many generations. He managed to leave this town in Washington just before it was completely cut off by the worst avalanches the town had ever seen.
Oh my God.
Yeah, and since all the investors had pulled out of the town, including Rockefeller, who had invested and built the initial railway to get access to the town, there was no more gold. He didn't care. The railway was never rebuilt, and I believe the town dried up and blew away.
Just left him to die.
Pretty much. Trump left Washington in 1898 when everybody was talking about gold in the Klondike. So young Friedrich Trump was bound for Canada. In her book, The Trumps, 3 Generations That Built an Empire, Gwenda Blair says that Friedrich had no intention of mining for gold or anything else. Instead, he made his money once again off of the miners themselves. Oh, hi, cat. We've had many dog guest stars on this show, but never a cat.
Yeah, just demanding full attention right now. I see you, yes.
All right, so young Trump made his way to Bennett Lake, BC, where he opened a restaurant, hotel, and brothel, later reopening the same business in Whitehorse in the Yukon. The Yukon Sun newspaper at the time wrote favorably of the food at Trump's restaurant, but noted that so-called respectable women shouldn't go anywhere near the place because they'd hear nothing but prostitute pounding all night. As in Washington, Trump again advertised his rooms for ladies, but he also advertised that the rooms in his hotel all had scales for weighing gold dust should the minors staying in the rooms have to pay for any sort of in-room services.
Oh, I see.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Which, like, this is the era before Ziploc bags. How did these prostitutes take payment in dust and make it work?
Just pull a bunch of sand that sparkles out of your pocket and be like, "Here you go. Thanks for the hand job."
Mm-hmm. Unfortunately for Trump, and to the enduring relief of 37 million people, Canada wasn't the kind of place Trump wanted to stick around in for very long. By 1901, the Mounties had announced plans to rid the Yukon of prostitution, gambling, and liquor. As you might expect, this rather quickly rid the Yukon of Frederick Trump, who returned home to his native Karlstad, this time with the equivalent in today's money of about $500,000 to his name. Say what you will about Friedrich Trump, he should have had a vasectomy. He should have stuck to fucking horses on his way up the Klondike. Straight up posthumously fucked that guy. Unlike some other Trumps, he could at least legitimately claim to be a self-made man. Back in Karlstad, Friedrich married his younger neighbor, Elizabeth Christ, who had been only 5 when he left home, because as any Trump knows, you only marry a woman your own age if you're just expecting her to be your starter wife. The young Trumps moved back to New York City only briefly, but Elizabeth was homesick and wanted to return to Germany. Unfortunately for Trump, and to the enduring dismay of 327 million people, or at least the less deranged component thereof, Germany ruled that as a consequence of avoiding his compulsory military service, Trump had forfeited his German citizenship. For worse or for worse, definitely worse, Trump was America's problem now. In 1905, Elizabeth gave birth to a future alleged profiteer, certified racist, and spawner of shitty progeny, Frederick Christ Trump. By 1908, Frederick Sr. was investing in Queens, New York real estate, beginning the business empire that his grandson would eventually still somehow claim to basically have founded on his own, with just a small loan from his papa. As for Friedrich, he died in May 1918 at the age of 49. His death was initially thought to be pneumonia, but actually turned out to be an early case of the Spanish flu. Sadly, his legacy would end up being mainly one of avoidance. His grandson, Orange Catastrophe, and current President Donald Trump, avoided telling any of his grandfather's real-life story, and instead claimed in his own biography that Grandpa Friedrich had been a lovely, upstanding gentleman from Sweden. As for learning any lessons from Friedrich's death, it appears that somehow still President Trump's it appears from somehow still President Trump's approach, to handling the coronavirus, it's a hoax, it's no big deal, and Mike Pence can solve it, that he's avoided learning anything. Par for the course, and a reminder that the lesson we should take from Friedrich Trump's story is that you shouldn't have kids, or failing that, you shouldn't have grandchildren, or failing that, I suppose prostitution pays, as long as you have a Ziploc bag.
All of these are true things.
I thought so. For our last plague victim, it would be a little too much to cover the coronavirus, as it's a little too current. So let's keep it light and talk about AIDS.
Yay!
Yay! It's time for our scandalous death entry, which is still pretty cold goss since our dearly departed back in 1985. Our star for this segment is a real star this time, or was, the handsome, talented, and super-duper gay Rock Hudson.
Of course.
If you're not familiar with Rock Hudson, you're not gay. And if you're gay and you're not familiar with Rock Hudson, I'm taking away your membership card, and you can't have it back until you've watched Pillow Talk.
It's okay. Those people don't actually exist.
I know.
It's a hypothetical.
It was an empty threat. Rock Hudson was born the much less cool-sounding Roy Harold Scherer Jr. in 1925. He was born with the greatest gift an American man can have. He was very handsome. Handsome enough that despite taking 28 takes, I think that's a typo. I think it's actually 38 takes to deliver his single line in his first film role. Despite that, Universal still signed him to a long-term contract and invested in turning him into a competent actor. No small feat, apparently, as it required acting lessons, singing lessons, dancing lessons, horseback riding lessons, and even fencing lessons. All of these investments...
Back when they did Fest.
Yeah, I know. All of these investments apparently paid off in spades, as Rock would go on to star in 70 films, many as a leading man. Well, a number of these films were flops. A number of his later films were flops that showed him well past his prime. For much of the 50s and 60s, Rock was known as the King of Hollywood and considered a sex symbol that could believably seduce any Hollywood starlet on screen. Today, he is probably best known for his romantic comedy pairings with Doris Day, starting with the previously mentioned Pillow Talk in 1959. Off-screen, Rock Hudson was living the life of a closeted gay celebrity, secretly meeting male lovers, paying his agent to keep the tabloids away, and even marrying his agent's assistant, Phyllis Gates, as a convenient beard. The marriage only lasted 3 years, and it's unclear if Gates knew that she was just a beard, as she claimed to have been in love with Rock all along. Not a huge surprise, since most women and a goodly number of men in America could have claimed the same at the time. The agent, whose name escapes me unfortunately at the moment, was renownedly gay in Hollywood, apparently. Everyone kind of assumed most of his clients were gay, so Rock Hudson's gayness was, underground, but underground. And
underground in the way that I believe Elizabeth Taylor once went, come on.
Oh, that's literally in the next paragraph. Yeah.
Oh, fuck.
But this agent, who I wish I could remember the name, his big allegation, too, was that his whole operation was one giant casting couch powered kind of dealy. So that Rock Hudson, Tab Hunter, all kinds of types that went through his office, went through in his office. Okay. After his death in 1985...
Well, okay, then.
Oh, sorry.
I said, well, okay then.
After his death in 1985, many of Rock's leading ladies claimed to have known about his homosexuality for a long time, including Mia Farrow, Julie Andrews, and Elizabeth Taylor, and presumably Doris Day, who was a very good friend of Rock's for many years and appropriately kept very silent on the matter even after his death. Many of Rock's co-stars have claimed that his gayness was an open secret, mainly because of this agent and his association with him. One person who definitely knew that he was gay was another powerful Hollywood lady, who Rock considered a friend. Your favorite and mine, Nancy Reagan. When Nancy and Ronald Reagan lived in Hollywood, back when Ron was still an actor playing the leading man, and before he became an actor playing the president, Ronald and Nancy were said to have many gay friends, but they were the right sort of gays. The flamboyant ones stuck to decorating and hairdressing, while the more passable ones operated quietly from deep in the closet. But to get to the White House, Ron and Nancy needed the support of America's evangelicals. They ran, apparently, during his campaign against Jimmy Carter. They basically ran a San Francisco gays elected a gay to office, and now American gays are going to elect a gay the president ad all over the South, basically smearing Carter. Yeah. So these are
the kind of stuff that was used in the Reagan era is like it's not even like bordering on farce. It's so offensive to modern sensibilities that it might as well be Nazi.
Oh yeah, we'll give a few more indications here a little later on, but yeah, horrible people. All right.
Yeah.
So because they needed the support of American evangelicals, and because for all the hints were given by history, they were genuinely terrible people, there couldn't be any hint of compassion or even basic toleration of gays. Not from a Republican candidate for president. Not even as the AIDS crisis exploded across America's cities. For a delightful look at, as we mentioned here, how Republicans in the early 80s felt about AIDS and gays, and basically every other minority in society, let's look at two helpful acronyms. GAY, G-A-Y, as the then president of American Airlines announced at a Republican convention, stood for Got AIDS Yet? The NIH, which traditionally stands for the National Institutes of Health, took on a second meaning in American Congress as not interested in homosexuals.
Oh my God.
If actions speak louder than words, this one should shout pretty loudly. In one of his first acts as president, Ronald Reagan responded to the emerging AIDS crisis by announcing that he would be cutting the CDC's research budget by 50%.
Oh my fuck.
4 years later, as AIDS diagnoses were in the tens of thousands, Reagan addressed the issue more directly by proposing a $10 million cut in AIDS research specifically. In 1984, Rock Hudson was diagnosed of AIDS. He sent anonymous letters to former lovers telling them to get tested. He didn't sign them because, as he told his closest associates at the time, he was too ashamed to admit his diagnosis to them. That same year, Rock attended a state dinner at the White House to show his support for the Reagans, who he still considered friends. He even sat at the First Lady's table. Despite their indifference and their callousness, Rock decided to stand by the Reagans. If only they had been worthy or remotely capable of responding in kind. Unfortunately, they were not. While Ronald Reagan can rot in hell for publicly laughing in response to concerns about dying gays, it was Nancy who took the more personal approach of single-handedly denying help and comfort to her supposed friend in his last days. A year after his diagnosis, Rock Hudson was dying. He traveled to France to seek help from Dr. Dominique Dormant, a leading AIDS researcher who had treated him earlier that year. There was a medication that was supposedly promising in France at the time that, of course, America didn't feel the need to invest in or approve or test at the time. So a lot of American AIDS patients were going to France. When he arrived in Paris, Rock collapsed while checking into his hotel. And then things got worse when the head of Dr. Dormant's hospital denied him admission as he was not a French citizen. Dr. Dormant instructed Rock's American publicist, Dale Olson, to write to anyone Rock might know in the American government, as he felt that an official request from the Americans would likely get Hudson admitted for treatment. Dale Olson figured he knew just the right people, old Hollywood friends in very high places, and he quickly sent off a telegram to the White House. The telegram, which was published by BuzzFeed News in 2015, doesn't mince words on the direness of the situation. To quote from the telegram, "Only one hospital in the world can offer necessary medical treatment to save the life of Rock Hudson, or at least alleviate his illness." Olson provided the name and number of the hospital administrator and begged the Reagans to help. The telegram made its way to the desk of a 23-year-old White House staffer, Mark Weinberg. Weinberg told BuzzFeed in 2015 that he addressed the matter with Nancy directly, right away, as he knew Rock Hudson had been a longtime friend. He advised her, however, that helping Rock wouldn't be fair. Apparently, the administration's fuck 'em approach had to be applied to 100% of dying AIDS victims, no matter how many times they dined at the Reagans' own dinner table.
Jesus Christ.
Nancy, font of compassion and empathy that she was, agreed and directed Weinberg to deny any assistance. Then she directed him to announce to the media that Ronald had called Rock to offer comfort, because as always, it's not actions that matter, but thoughts and prayers. A memo written by Weinberg at the time documents his conversation with Nancy and notes that the First Lady did not feel that this was something the White House should get into. Rock Hudson's health continued to deteriorate, and with the help of his French doctor and some of his associates, he did eventually manage to receive treatment from Dr. Dormant, without any help from American officials, but it was too late. Hudson, with no more options, returned to his home in Los Angeles, where he died 3 months later. He lived just long enough to see his AIDS diagnosis become public, inadvertently being outed in the process. And even though he received approximately 30,000 letters of support, his biographer Mark Griffin notes that Rock died feeling ashamed of his disease. As for Nancy Reagan, who I suspect was entirely unfamiliar with the concept of shame, she finally fucked off the mortal coil in 2016. At her funeral, Hillary Clinton infamously credited Nancy as an activist in the fight against AIDS, who together with Ronald started, she said, a national conversation on AIDS. Because apparently this world is Rock Hudson's personal hell and we're all just living in it.
Yeah.
For the time being anyway, remain indoors, everyone.
Thank you so much for that.
I do have a fun fact this week.
Ooh, fun fact.
There's only one because nothing in the world is fun this week. And of course it's dark and death related because that's the world we now live in. Fun fact number one, the only. Joan II had a brother. He only lived for 5 days. During those 5 days, he was technically King of France. His official regnal name is John the Posthumous.
Oh my God, that's
which
something so
is not
horrible
funny,
about
but is hilarious.
It's hilariously horrible.
I really enjoyed it.
John the Posthumous. We didn't even get there in time to name you.
No, exactly.
Sorry.
Not even John the baby. No.
Oh my God.
And that's it.
Well,
stay indoors, everyone.
Stay indoors.
And don't talk about the events.
Well, thank you so much for listening to... Hold on, I can do that again. 1 second. Well, thank you... Thank you so much for listening to Tales from the Gutter, a scandalous podcast. A scandalo. If you enjoyed it, please like. Check out our merch. It's coming, I swear. If you enjoyed it, please like, share, and subscribe. And if you're watching this on YouTube, please ding the thing.
You can ding the thing by finding us at youtube.com/mygenderiscinema.
Yeah.
I'm getting so good at it.
I know, right? Don't forget to visit HereEgo Productions on Patreon, where you will find this and other podcasts and videos and so much more. And please show your support by pledging as little as $1 a month so we can keep bringing these shows to you. Thank you so much.
Good night.